Good afternoon. My name is Samantha Lopez,
I'm Bryant Andrade.
And I'm Vinson.
and we're going to talk about deconstructive criticism and how it can be applied to literature.
So with deconstructive criticism, it was one of the most important theorists that there are is a French philosopher named Jacques Derrida, and the theory was actually developing around the late 1960s. A little information about Jacques Derrida is that he was born on July 15, 1930 in Algeria. He's also Jewish, and he attended National University. He also, unfortunately, died of pancreatic cancer in 2004. Okay, an introduction to deconstructive theory is he argues that words are unreliable because the only meanings words have is the meanings that they are given. The theory looks to find the inconsistencies of and biases within the text and proves that that they contradict themselves. Okay, like I said, it points out the inconsistencies of language. So, for example, time flies like an arrow. When you hear that in a social situation, you're assuming that it's saying that time is flying by, that it's passing quickly. Or you can interpret that to be as time a fly, like you would time an arrow, and it just the meaning of the phrase changes on the situation. Okay. It also changes when you put emphasis on one particular word and not the others. So you're saying the same thing, but the meaning is changing. So, for example, President Reagan says the Marines do not have to go to El Salvador. President Reagan says the Marines do not have to go to El Salvador. So with that, when I put the emphasis on the Marines, it's implying that that the Marines don't have to go, but somebody else does. Or with President Reagan says the Marines do not have to go to El Salvador. By that, he's saying that the Marines do have to go somewhere, but just not to El Salvador. If you want to understand deconstructive theory, you have to understand structuralist theory, and that's the entire concept is how language is created. So, firstly, you have the sign, the word, the signifier, the written or the spoken word when you're actually saying it or you're writing it down, and the signified, which is the image that pops to your head when you are saying or writing it. But for deconstructive theory, language does not consist of the unions of signifiers or signifieds. It consists of just a chain of the signifiers. So it's not really a formula, it's more like just one signifier leads to another signifier, which leads to another, etc., etc. But deconstruction takes that idea a big step further by claiming that language is not non-referential because it refers neither to the things in the world nor to our concept of things, but only to the play of signifiers of which language itself consists of. So like I was saying, it completely depends on one signifier that leads to another, and that's how we define words and things like that. Okay, for example, take book. A few ideas come to mind, like education, leisure, like you're reading for fun, or reading the book. You're learning, and there are pages in the book. You'll probably find the book in the library. It's all these ideas that come from the word book. That's what shapes the definition of the word. Derrida has established two common characteristics for language. One is that with the constant change of adding like the new signifiers, and then you're never going to find a solid definition of a word because it's always going to be changing. Like you started off a book, and then it goes into library, then it goes into reading, and the pages and the definition just kind of shapes in a way. That and the meaning that is created tends to be in contrast to another definition that has already been created. So I'll explain that when he says that with the binary opposition. The entire concept of that is that we're contrasting two words, for example, good and evil. So masculine or feminine, organized or disorganized. He also explained that within the binary opposition, that there's always going to be one that is privileged and one that isn't. And he was explaining how if we can find out which one in the binary is being privileged, then we can find out a little about our culture. Yeah.
Deconstruction theory can also be applied to the world around us. Our idea of the world through Western reasoning is skewed because while Western reasoning attempts to explain our world, it stands on the outside of the world and seeks to make clear. The Western philosophy only explains Western philosophy. It excludes other cultures and others, so only leaving, just a pigeonhole view. Western philosophy, it can also be weakened due to it being a mere concept, much like language. Philosophy is in a constant state of metamorphosis. Language is vital to our world, but it's also unreliable because it can be interpreted in countless ways. This language can help invalidate our ideas about the world. Language was thought to be a byproduct of our experiences, but it has become the blueprint to our experiences. And like I mentioned before, language is shaky and unstable, and philosophy is understood via written and spoken word. Therefore, it too is shaky and unstable. An example of this is Christopher Columbus when he sailed he thought he was sailing towards India, but in fact he was sailing towards the Americas. And this concept of the people he saw was different from what he was actually experiencing, which were Native Americans. He thought that he landed in India, but he actually landed in the Americas. He drew similarities between what he knew about Indians and what he was actually experiencing, which was completely different. Deconstructive theory can be applied to human identity as well. Humans rely on language, therefore they too are part of the language, i.e. Unstable and constantly altering. Deconstructive theory argues that we have no identity because we are not one-faceted beings. We have different sides, moods, and feelings throughout the day in our lives. And we try to cope with this by denying that notion. Deconstructive theory argues that we don't have one fixed identity. But on a lighter note, we do invent our identity, so that means that we can reinvent it as well. And it can also explain why we may have difficulties with our encounters in the world and with communicating with others, since we're all different people and we have different identities that we claim. And that's it.
Deconstruction theory can be used as a tool to look at different types of literature. Various other theories like Marxism or feminism use deconstruction theory in order to find the ideologies in different texts. This deconstruction also seeks to reveal the undecisability of the texts themselves. And the way they do this is they find the different interpretations contained within the text and show how they contrast and contradict each other. And also they reveal the ideologies and show how they're trying to push a certain point, or they have a certain view that they're created in. Because of these ideologies, binaries are created. These binaries are a hierarchy which seeks to judge and put one type of idea over another. And the language they use often creates these binaries, like good and evil. Using deconstruction theory, we can look at a message that literature has. Usually there's some sort of central message that is trying to send, and deconstruction theory uses the text to counter that message using its own in-test examples that actually say the opposite of what the text is intending to say. We decided to analyze Cinderella, and we used my Brothers Grimm Cinderella story. And in the story, one of the main themes is you have Cinderella, and she's a good and pious individual, and then you have the stepsisters and the stepmother, and they're supposed to be evil, they're wicked and false. So some of the ways we see that Cinderella is pious and good in the text is she mourns his mother, she goes every day and cries next to her grave. Also, when she asks her father for a gift, all she wants is a measly twig, and she also is modest with the prince. When he comes, she runs away from him and doesn't let him know that where she lives in order to kind of escape him, I guess. And also she does all the work. There's not really anyone else in the story who works besides her, so she's always seen working. Stepsisters, on the other hand, they spend a lot of time terrorizing Cinderella. They call her names. They say they don't want to eat in the same room as her. Also, when they ask the father for gifts, they say they want expensive gifts, jewelry and clothing. And then when the prince comes, they try to trick him into thinking that they are actually Cinderella, and they chop off part of their foots. And it's part of their deception. Also, they never are seen working. They always just seem to kind of lie around, opposed to Cinderella. Also, but using deconstruction, we can see that they're not actually that different. Cinderella deceives her stepmother, just like the stepsisters deceive the prince. And she says that she's going to pick up these lentils for her as part of one of her tasks, and really she just gets her bird friends to do it for her, and she does it several times. Also, she only ever uses any of her wishes for herself. She uses these wishes only to get herself these beautiful clothing, kind of like the ones that the stepsisters wanted. So she has these beautiful clothing in order to woo the prince. And also when he comes, she basically tricks him by not saying anything whenever he enters the room. And so she kind of tricks the prince too. And also when she has the chance, she uses her own powers against the sisters. At the very end, they agreed to be in a bridal session, which was probably pretty painful considering they both mangled their feet. So they had to walk down the aisle with her. And when they did, she had her bird friends peck out their eyes. So when she had her power, she used it against her sisters, just as her sisters used their power against her. Also, when we look at the main message of the story, one of the lines is, "Dear child, be good and pious, and God will always take care of you. And I will look down upon you from heaven, and be with you." And basically it's saying, if you're good, you will be rewarded. And this uses, and as we've seen, she's not that different from her sisters, so why is she rewarded and the sisters aren't? One of the other messages is they were beautiful and fair in appearance, but at heart they were black and ugly. This talks about the stepsisters saying that inner beauty is more important than outer beauty. But if we look at the story of Cinderella, we see that the prince only recognizes and only is really interested in Cinderella when she's clean and she has rich clothing on. And when she doesn't, there's two different times when she doesn't even recognize her. Or he doesn't even recognize her. So we can see that kind of that message isn't really all that strong using its own text. Okay, stop it.
In conclusion, deconstructive theory helps us deeply analyze a text further and help us find alternate meanings in the words that are used. But deconstructive theory can also help us realize that words don't mean anything because they are a mere human concept.